Welcome back. This is the fourth session of Week 8. In this session, we will look at how artists ventured abroad to learn new styles of arts and how they impacted the Korean art scene in the early modern period. After the opening of ports and the introduction to Western painting styles in the late 19th century, an increasing number of artists began to look toward new types of art. In particular, oil painting was a new and exciting medium that attracted many outward-thinking art students. Many Korean students sought modern education in Japan at the turn of the 20th century, as Japanese influence grew on the peninsula. After annexation, colonial authorities controlled and restricted travel outside the Japanese Empire, further compelling Koreans to seek education in Japan. This trend was especially pronounced in the field of Western-style painting, as there was a lack of options for education in Korea. The Tokyo School of Fine Arts became the primary institution where Korean artists received formal training in oil painting, especially in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. The Western Painting Division at the Tokyo School of Fine Arts was established in 1896. Kuroda Seiki was appointed as the head of the Western Painting Department. During his time in Paris from 1884 to 1893, Kuroda Seiki studied under Raphael Collin, a salon painter. Collin's approach, which adhered to French academic principles, significantly influenced Kuroda's artistic style and subject matter. As an instructor, Kuroda then transmitted such styles to emerging oil painters. This created a chain of artistic influence, with French academic painting traditions being adapted and passed down through generations of artists in Japan and Korea. At the Tokyo School of Fine Arts, Korean students were exposed to a curriculum heavily influenced by European academic traditions. The curricula emphasized developing fundamental skills such as drawing from plaster casts, studying anatomy, and painting nudes, and introduced a systematic training in Western painting techniques and aesthetics to Japanese students. However, it's important to note that the education these artists received was not simply a direct transmission of Western techniques, but rather Western art as interpreted and adapted by Japanese artists and educators. This created a unique dynamic where Korean artists were learning a Japanized version of Western art. The impact of this education was profound. When these artists returned to Korea, they began to challenge traditional Korean artistic practices and introduced new genres like plein air landscape painting and nude studies. However, this education also came with complexities, and some artists also struggled to reconcile their newfound techniques with traditional Korean aesthetics and themes. As the artists were educated and worked under colonial rule, it inevitably meant that the experiences and the reception of their work back in Korea were dictated by Japanese tastes and interests. For instance, important professional outlets for artists, like the annual Joseon Art Exhibition, were dominated with Japanese experts, especially those from the Tokyo School of Fine Arts. As these jurors were responsible for selecting works to be displayed and awarded prizes, catering to their taste became a prerequisite to becoming a successful artist. This created a biased approach to art, especially in the preference of French academicism and Impressionism in the section of Western art, which resulted in a level of standardization and homogenization in the styles of arts that were understood as good or better art. Nevertheless, by the 1920s and 1930s, the number of Korean students studying art in Japan had grown significantly. Records indicate that by 1945, 43 Korean students had graduated from the Tokyo School of Fine Arts Western Painting Department. These artists would go on to play crucial roles in the development of modern Korean art. From the 1920s, the Japanese government general began the so-called Cultural Rule of Korea. After the nationwide March 1st independence movement, the colonial authorities became acutely aware of the difficulty in controlling the colony with an oppressive regime. Instead, they opted for a direction of cultural appeasement in which the colonial government aimed to promote a facade of cultural freedom while maintaining control. Under this policy, limited support for the arts emerged, allowing for the establishment of Korean language newspapers and cultural institutions. While some artistic expression was permitted, it remained heavily censored, and closely monitored. Still, this period saw a cautious revival of Korean literature and visual arts, as well as an increased autonomy among artists and artist groups. When Saito Makoto became Governor General of Korea in 1919, he also expanded educational opportunities for Koreans, bringing them closer to parity with Japanese education. This led to an increase in Korean students pursuing higher education in the 1920s, with several institutions established in Seoul, including Gyeongsang Imperial University. Despite these developments, the Japanese government still encouraged students to study in Japan, believing it would assimilate Koreans and foster pro-Japanese sentiments. In the 1920s and 30s, Japanese art education diversified significantly compared to the earlier dominance of the Tokyo School of Fine Arts. Indeed, students did not only receive training in Western-style painting in Japan. Many Korean students also studied Nihonga, or Japanese-style painting. This style stems from pre-Heian times, but re-emerged in popularity during the late 19th century as a response to the growing popularity of Western-style painting. It is characterized by its softness in color and texture, and utilized traditional Japanese materials like mineral pigment, shell white, animal glue, with gold or silver pigments or leaves. Korean students were also able to study Nihonga-style painting from Japanese artists and instructors based in Korea, and adapted Nihonga techniques to depict themes and subjects that were distinctly Korean. For instance, many of Lee Young-il's works employ the styles of Nihonga painting in their soft pastel hues and delicate renderings of figures, but the subjects are dressed in Korean hanbok and are set against an idyllic and romanticized background. The works of Lee Young-il are representative examples of works that cater to the Japanese taste for the so-called local color, which were exoticized and romanticized renditions of Korean reality and landscape that gained popularity in the 1930s. In Western painting, alternative schools like the Imperial Art School, Pacific School of Fine Arts, and Cultural Academy offered varied curriculums and encouraged experimentation with modernist European styles such as Fauvism, Cubism, and Expressionism. They provided a more liberal environment for creative exploration, free from the rigid state-controlled curriculum of the Tokyo School of Fine Arts. These shifts reflected a broader cultural exchange, with artists embracing bold colors, abstract forms, and personal expression, signaling Japan's integration into the global avant-garde. This diversification was driven by both a cultural shift toward greater individualism in Japanese art and a growing interest in Western avant-garde movements, which found enthusiastic support among Japanese young artists. By the 1930s, students could choose from a range of styles, philosophies, and teaching methods, reflecting a broader movement in Japan toward artistic pluralism that was in stark contrast to the earlier centralized model that had emphasized a singular national artistic identity. This movement gradually impacted the Korean art scene as many artists trained in Japan returned to Korea from the 1920s. Although less common, Korean artists did venture outside of the territories of the Japanese Empire during the colonial period. During the 1920s, a notable group of Korean oil painters sought artistic education in Europe and the United States. For instance, Lee Jong-woo, Bae Eun-sung, Na Hae-seok, and Baek Nam-sun traveled to Europe to further their studies in Western painting techniques. Meanwhile, Chang Bal and Im Yong-yeon ventured to the United States, with Chang studying at Columbia University and Im at Yale University. This shift towards studying in Western countries marked a significant development in the education of Korean artists, broadening their exposure to diverse artistic traditions and contemporary movements beyond the Japanese-filtered Western art that they had previously encountered. Lee Jong-woo initially received training in the Tokyo School of Fine Arts, but moved on to study in a private artist studio in Paris from 1925 to 1928. He largely maintained the painting style taught at the Tokyo School of Fine Arts, rather than engaging with contemporary European art movements. However, his works produced in Europe exhibit some traces of influence from artists like Cézanne. Upon returning to Korea, he often exhibited with independent institutions, possibly to challenge colonial dominance in the art scene. Na was already a well-known woman artist by the time she trained in Paris. Na was trained in oil painting and studied at the private women's School of Fine Arts and became the first Korean female artist to hold a private exhibition in Seoul in 1921. During a year-and-a-half trip to Europe and the United States in the late 1920s with her husband, Na also developed an interest in Fauvism and Expressionism. Bae Hoon-sung had a successful career in Europe, studying at the Berlin University of the Arts. He became known for works that merged modernist styles with traditional Korean themes, often catering to Orientalist views. While celebrated in Europe, his style faced criticism upon returning to Korea, where his works were seen as overly simplistic or childish. He later moved on to North Korea, where he helped establish Pyongyang University of Fine Arts. Baek Nam-sun, the first Korean female artist to exhibit in Europe, studied at the Tokyo Women's School of Art and later in a private art studio in Paris. She developed an interest in Fauvism and gained recognition in French salons. Baek's work often blended Eastern and Western styles, and after returning to Korea, she and her husband Im Yong-yeon held a notable joint exhibition in 1930. Baek Nam-sun met husband Im Yong-yeon in 1929 when Im received a grant from Yale University to travel to Paris. Although most of his works are now in North Korea, he continued his work in Korea after returning from Paris and held joint exhibitions with his wife. The couple participated in exhibitions such as the Hyopjeon, Mogyulhae Group exhibition in 1934, and the Mokshibue Group exhibition in 1937. Finally, Jang Bal trained in oil painting at the Tokyo School of Fine Arts, the New York National Academy of Design, and Columbia University. In the US, he studied both painting and art theory. After returning to Korea, he focused on creating Catholic religious paintings, while also teaching at various schools. In 1934, he organized Korean artist group Mogyulhae with other prominent artists such as Koo Bo-nung, Kil Jin-seop, Lee Ma-dong, and Kim Yong-jun. As such, artists who studied Western painting abroad typically gained recognition as prominent artists when they returned to Korea, and continued to exert significant influence on the Korean art scene and younger Korean artists. In this session, we talked about artists who studied and were active abroad in the early 20th century. Their experience in and out of Japan greatly impacted how modern art was perceived and understood by Koreans. These artists not only brought back new painting techniques acquired abroad, but also artistic practices and exhibition culture, and formed artist groups that shaped the Korean art scene of the 20th century. We'll continue this discussion in our next and final session.